Welcome, friends. We're glad that you're here today.
Hey, everybody.
Hope you're having an amazing day. We are about to record episode 127 of the Family Meeting Podcast. We're glad that you're watching with us today. And we want to hear from you by the end of this episode. So you need to be thinking while we're recording of what has happened in your life and how you feel about our topic today. Do you want to tell them what the topic is? It's the bad word.
Submission.
Bleep. Bad word. We don't say that word.
So, literally, though, those of you who are in MMA and jiu-jitsu, just let us know how you feel about tapping out, being submitted in a form of competition.
And of course, that is not at all what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about submission as found in the Bible in a husband-wife relationship. And so that's what we really want to hear about. But if you want to talk about MMA, like, we're cool with that. I have nothing to say on this topic.
Totally are.
He will.
We can talk about it for a lot.
I can name some MMA fighters.
Okay, let's hear it.
Brock Lesnar.
Yes.
Oh, darn. The Irish one. I like him. He's the one I like.
He's getting
the red hair.
He's getting ready to do a new episode of the Ultimate Fighter TV show, and he's going to be fighting soon.
Joe, I'm thinking of the announcer guy. Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan.
You're thinking of Joe Rogan. Okay. Yes, he's an announcer, podcaster.
He's not a fighter, but at least I came up with him.
No, he's in the same business as us, podcasting.
All right, who's the redhead?
Conor McGregor.
Conor
McGregor.
I like him. He was the one that I kind of liked.
Yeah.
Like, that I wanted to win.
Yeah.
I'm out. Okay. I'm tapping.
You're tapping out? You're submitting.
I submitted.
She submitted. There you go.
I lost.
Hey, speaking of submission and being tapped out, we want you to tap this out on your calendar.
Smooth.
See how I did that?
Very smooth transition.
Relationship refresh. I was just messaging yesterday with a listener in Canada about relationship refresh in the podcast. It was actually quite interesting because this person wrote into us just to say how much they appreciated our content and our openness, and to see a couple who's raising 4 kids. This person has 4 boys. We have 4 girls. And so I said, thanks for your encouragement. Appreciate that. Can I ask how you heard about the podcast? And he heard about the podcast from Eventbrite. He was looking for events in the Orlando area and came across Relationship Refresh, and was like, hey, I wonder who these people are, and started listening to the podcast.
All I'm hearing is that this guy is a very smart guy. He's in Canada in February, and he's like, I got to get to Orlando. Yeah. I'm going south.
Yeah.
Smart guy.
Although if you're in Canada, you want to come to Florida.
In February.
Yeah. But
yeah. But hey, he'll really get that.
I thought that was awesome. So I'm hope they're trying to make plans to come and be a part of Relationship Refresh.
That'd be so awesome.
We'd love for you to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So July 21st, 22nd in 2023.
That's right. We have some special things going to happen there. So join us. But for right now, we need to get on with this episode. We're going to talk about submission, and we want to hear from you at the end too. We want you to comment in on what your opinions are on submission and what you've experienced in your life. But until then,
gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas. This is my wife. La 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 Lysandra. La 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 Lysandra. She's so pretty, oh so pretty. I really like her smile. She's got a pretty smile. Those eyes go on for miles. La 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 Lysandra.
Obviously, we can't dance. Hello, and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 127 of the Family Meeting Podcast. We're glad that you're with us today. On today's episode, we're going to talk about kind of a bad word in our culture.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Can we do that and keep this rated, whatever it's rated?
What is it rated? Some of our episodes could be MA because we really talk about sex.
No, we don't get graphic. MA is for graphic stuff.
Oh, okay.
We're not getting graphic.
Okay. My version of MA is probably not the same as everybody else's version of MA.
We keep it PG, maybe PG 13-ish.
Sometimes. But only on certain episodes.
Yeah.
So the bad word that we're going to talk about today is submission.
Ooh.
Yes.
I just heard like cringes all over the place when you said that.
Yeah.
All of our listeners like shrunk back like, ooh.
Yeah. Because if you're a woman and you hear the word submission, a lot of times you cringe because you're like, oh, great. I have no opinions. I have no choices. I am a slave. I hate submission, and you cringe. For a man, you may be cringing because you have had situations in your life where your wife has resented you for the role that you've been given in your marriage, or they have fought you on it, and it's been this whole source of contention in your relationship. This is a topic that does not get discussed very often because it's really easy to make people angry. And if we're doing our job today, we will make you angry as well.
No, I don't think that's it. That's not what we're trying to do here.
JK, people. See, we're trying to keep it light.
I think we might have to have a little powwow and figure out.
We're going to keep this episode on submission light, cheerful, and happy because it is kind of a heavy one.
And we understand that you may be one of those people who immediately has feelings of resentment, hurt, or even flashbacks of trauma that come up when you hear the word submission. And we understand that there are men who use the word submission as a way of control and abuse. We understand there's churches out there, maybe I should put churches in quotes, who use the word submission to spiritually abuse people, to control and dominate a people. And I just want to say right from the beginning, that's not okay. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. That's not what we're going to be pushing on the families who listen to our podcast, because it's flat out wrong.
That's right.
And if you are in an environment that uses the word submission to abuse you or anyone else, you need to get yourself out of that environment, whatever it is. You need to find yourself a different church, a different group that will help support and encourage what the biblical definition of submission is all about. But because of that, it's one reason why we think it's so important to talk about this, because we do need to talk about what submission actually is and what it is not.
Submission does not mean that one person submits to the other person's authority and gets trampled on and controlled and basically becomes a slave. That is not submission. Submission does not mean that there are different values placed on men and women. You know, submission does not mean that the man is more important and the woman has less value.
Well, and in some circles, that's exactly the way that it is. Like, maybe it's never spoken that way, but everybody understands that's what it means.
It's lived out.
The man is the king of the castle, and he comes home, and everybody's in subjection to him, and it's his little kingdom, and everybody's there to serve him. No way. That is not a biblically correct view of the marriage relationship, of the home, or the word submission.
That's right. Everyone has the same value. The husband and the wife have the same value. But for that matter, all people have the same value, okay?
Right, yep.
So all people have a very high value in God's sight. In fact, such a high value that he would send his only son to die for all people. Men, women, all races, all nations. Men are not more important than women, not in the eyes of God, and not in reality, okay? That's not what submission is. Men are not more important than women in the eyes of God, okay? So make sure that you understand that. That is not what we're talking about, and that's not what God's word says. It's not what submission is.
And we do have the same value in God's eyes, but he has created us in very unique ways. And we do have unique roles and parts to play in the world and in the home. But just because my role is different than Lysandra's doesn't mean that I'm more valuable than her or she's more valuable than me.
That's right.
It's just that we were created for different and unique challenges.
Well, and the truth is we have to be aware of starting to place, value in different ways on different people, because women can take it the other way too. And we can start being like, well, women are more valuable. We're smarter. We can get more done. We can multitask, all these things. Women are better than men. And that's not true either. So you can really take that pendulum and swing it too far the other direction as well. So it's something to pay attention to.
And you're right about that, because there are a lot of people in our culture, in our world, that have done exactly that. Like, they have been tired of being dominated and controlled and kept down by men. So they've completely thrown that off and they've swung it the other way, and which is not a biblically correct view of marriage and roles and relationships either. And one of the things we were talking about this, we've got a men's group that we meet a couple times a month, excuse me, to just, we go through different books, and the book that we're going through right now is Kingdom Man by Tony Evans. A great book. I highly recommend it to our listeners. But we were just talking about how that fathers in the home, in culture, in society, in TV shows, and in movies and stuff like that, have been so attacked as, just idiots.
Bumbling fools.
Better off if they're not there. And part of that is exactly what you're talking about, Lysandra, where we've swung the other way now, because I think in a part of the way that word submission has been used and abused incorrectly.
Right.
Really, submission in a way is about organized leadership. In any good company or organization, there's a chain of command, and there's somebody at the top of that chain of command who will take responsibility for what happens on every other level. That is the husband. We are all personally responsible for our own actions. So I'm not saying anybody in the home is not responsible for their own actions. We are. Your children are responsible for their own choices they make.
Right.
Now, as parents, because we're higher up the chain and in roles as parents, I'm going to be held accountable and responsible. Lysandra's going to be held accountable and responsible for the way we parent our children. They're responsible for their own choices. So as parents, I'm responsible for my own choices. I'm also responsible in the way that I parent. So double responsible.
Right.
Now let's look at the marriage relationship. Now, is Lysandra responsible for her own choices and actions?
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm responsible for mine. But I'm also held responsible for my actions as a husband and how I lead my family.
Right.
How I lead my wife. So with that responsibility comes higher accountability. And it doesn't mean the person at the top gets to have his way all the time and do whatever he wants all the time and run anyone below him ragged. That's not submission. That's not biblical. It doesn't please God. And we've talked about this in other podcast episodes when we talk about roles in marriage. And we look at Ephesians chapter number 5, which really hits home to the husband, to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And really, husbands, listen, if you would get that part right, submission would not even be an issue in your household.
Exactly.
If your wife knows that you love her like Christ loved the church, in other words, that's sacrificially and that's completely. And that's a love that has the other person's best interest at heart. Not your own selfishness, not your own wants, not your own desires, but it really means putting that other person first. If you would do that, there is no argument about submission. Submission doesn't become an ugly word. Submission has become an ugly word because husbands have not fulfilled their responsibility to love their wives like Christ loved the church.
That's right.
So if I'm loving my wife like Christ loved the church, I'm not viewing myself as a king of the castle. I'm viewing myself as the servant of all. That's what Jesus said. You want to be the greatest? You got to be the servant of all. That means serving your kids and serving your wife. So get that part right, guys, and stop worrying about submission so much. Just fulfill your responsibility. And I really believe the other equation will take care of itself.
That's right.
That's my little rant to husbands. I'll move on.
Okay. Sounds good. I have a feeling, though, there may be rants in the future on this episode to come.
Okay.
I'm feeling like you're not done. Not really. Submission is a biblical command, even though it's not supposed to be something that is abusive and controlling and all of those things that we just talked about. It's a biblical command, but it has to be done in a biblical way. It's usually talked about in reference to a wife submitting to her husband, and we do see this in the Bible. But there's more to it than just that, and we're going to look at that. And we want to use this passage in Ephesians 5:21. We're starting at verse 21 today, but it would be really valuable for you as husband and wife to both read through Ephesians chapter 5 all the way through. Just read it, ponder it, talk about each verse. It would really help your marriage, I'm telling you. But we're going to focus on this little part here starting in verse 21. Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also a wife should submit to everything to their husbands. So ladies, we see that it is plain and clear. Yes, wives, you are supposed to submit to your own husbands. I like to really point out the word own. Submit to your own husband. Okay.
Yeah.
And here's what sometimes we have seen is we see men who are in leadership in churches saying all women need to submit to them, like a pastor. You don't have to submit to anyone else's husband. This includes your pastor.
Right. Yeah.
You are submitting just to your own husband, not all the men in the world, okay?
You're right.
So keep that in mind too, because sometimes it's taken way out of context right there too. Okay, my favorite thing that I've ever heard, and okay, this was told to me by a lady who heard it in a sermon, and I can't remember who the lady was that I was talking to. It was a friend of mine, and she couldn't remember who the person was that said it, but she had this written down.
It was probably me.
It was probably, most likely.
I think she was listening to one of my sermons.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if people on listening to podcasts can sense sarcasm. I hope that they can, because that was very sarcastic.
It sounds as amazing as what you're about to tell us, then I think it probably was me.
Yeah, probably. Okay, submission is described as this. Submission is ducking so God can hit your husband.
Now that's funny.
I love that. Submission is just ducking so God can hit your husband. It's not about your husband being in charge, more important, more valuable, whatever. Your husband's going to be responsible for what happens in the home and how he treats you and how he treats the children and how he spends his time, just like we'll be responsible for those things as well. But he's kind of up there at the top of the chain of command, and there's more responsibility up there. And the truth is, if your husband is loving you the way that Christ loved the church, which is the command, then submission is really beautiful, and it's actually freedom. Submission is huge freedom, and it's safety, because you're submitting to your husband, and maybe you disagree with the direction he's going to go. It's not against the Bible or anything. It's just not what you would do. But you submit, and you're like, okay, go ahead. I'll follow. Let's do this. And when it all falls apart, he's the one who has to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And so there's freedom in that. You know, it's not going to be my problem. Well, I guess that's not all entirely true, because a lot of times the poor decisions that our husband make affect the rest of us, and we have to deal with that.
But as far as accountability to God,
right,
because of the role that the husband is in and been given in the marriage relationship, he is the one that's going to be held responsible for that.
That's right. Now, the whole system breaks down and falls apart when the husband mistreats the wife. And the wife then feels like she cannot submit to her husband. And pretty soon here, everybody's not following their own role. And it's just like anarchy. It's chaos. It all falls apart. But when everybody is fulfilling their God-given role, it's really quite beautiful. And I can say that with authority and with confidence, because that's how we live in our marriage. And we're both very satisfied, very fulfilled. We have peace in our home, but we're following this plan that was created by the master designer, the master creator, who even created marriage itself. We're following his plan. And that's why we have such beautiful peace in our marriage and in our home. Not to say we never have problems. And you hear us all the time talking about when we fight and our arguments that we have. So you know about that. But even in the midst of those, there's this respect, there's this love, and there's a peace to it because we're fulfilling the God-given roles that he has placed.
Well, and one of the things we talked about this book, Kingdom Man, and it brings up this conversation right now that you're talking about brings up a story that Tony talks about his dad. His parents were married. Neither one of them were Christians. They didn't believe in Jesus as the way of salvation. His dad, through circumstances, comes to faith in Jesus. And the way that Tony describes it is that his mom couldn't stand his dad before, and she really hated him when he became a Christian and just made life so hard for him. But he loved her, and he determined that the more that she hated him and the more she mistreated him, the more he was going to love her.
Wow.
And the only time he could find peace in that home to read his Bible without conflict was late at night after his wife went to sleep. So around midnight, he'd be up reading his Bible and spending time with God. And one night, his wife comes down. This is Tony's mom, comes down and is weeping and says, "I don't know what this is about, but I want to know, because the more that I hate you, the more I mistreat you, the more you love me, and the more you treat me well." And that's exactly what we're talking about, is if you would just handle and take care of your role, that helps the whole machine called marriage work a lot smoother. And what happens is we so often want to highlight how the other person's not fulfilling what they're supposed to be doing instead of just handling our own. And then when we go back to this, because as the husband, I'm going to be a little more harsh on the men. Listen, husbands, if you would just do what you're supposed to do in loving your wife, you're not going to have to worry about the other part of that equation. But as Lysandra mentioned, wives are supposed to submit to their own husbands. Okay, we see that in Scripture, very plain, very clear. But there's a verse that people love to skip, and that's verse 20. And Lysandra read it briefly. It says, submitting to one another. Did you get that? So before he even starts talking about the husbands and wives stuff, submitting to one another out of a reverence for Christ. And in other words, as believers, we're supposed to be honoring one another, preferring one another, submitting to one another. So that includes me as a husband with my relationship with my wife. And we kind of have this, because of the magnified way that Paul wrote to the Ephesians about husbands and wives and their roles and responsibilities, we kind of just have this idea, and we separate what we are to be as a Christian with other Christians from our relationship with our husband and our wife.
Yeah.
Like, as Christians, we are all told, I think of John 15, we're all told to love one another as Christ loved us. Okay, that lines up with what the husband is told about the wife. And we kind of just let wives off the hook sometimes that they don't really have to love their husbands like Christ loved the church. No, that's a command to all Christians.
Amen. Okay,
the same is true in submission. It is a command that as believers, we're to be in submission to one another. That we're to honor each other, prefer each other. Lysandra and I, we do a Bible reading devotional plan on the Bible app with people who are in our Facebook group, and we just kind of put the link out, and whoever wants to join the group can join and do the devotion with us. And this morning, we're doing this reading plan on marriage, and it's talking about sex. And in the conversation, whoever's writing this particular devotional talks about the fact that a sexual relationship between a husband and a wife is not about pleasing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is about serving the needs of your spouse.
Yep.
And that is true of a sexual relationship between a husband and wife, but really it's true in the marriage in and of itself.
Yes.
I mean, as a husband and a wife, we ought to be literally fighting about who's going to serve the other one more, who's going to serve the other one better, how are we going to submit to each other.
Yeah.
And so it's this mutual submission, because marriage is a team. It's a team.
Mm-hmm.
We are truly a team together. And it's not that one person is more valuable than the other. If you really explore what we're to be as Christians, we're all to be the same thing.
Yes.
Now, our roles are different, as we've already mentioned. I, as a husband, am going to be held accountable for what happens in our home. And I'm going to be held accountable to lead our home well. But as far as it comes to my relationship with my wife, and then, of course, passing that through our kids as well, I am to submit to them. I am to serve them. I'm to honor them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not leave out that verse right ahead and just go straight to the wife and say, you need to submit.
Yeah.
No, we're to be submitting to each other.
That's right. And the other part of submission, I've already read the passage on how the wives are supposed to submit to the husbands. So we're going to go a little bit further in Ephesians 5. And this is going to make some of you women uncomfortable. Okay? And I want you to know that I care about you, and I understand that there are maybe some things that have happened in your history that would make this passage of scripture very uncomfortable for you. Because a lot of what we're going to read in just a second here is about how the husband is the head. Okay. And the husband is, is the head of the wife and in charge and whatever. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable because you've been taken advantage of. Yeah. And that's been taken and it's been used in the wrong way as a weapon rather than in love. So we read that in the earlier portion of Ephesians 5, but this is how the husbands are supposed to love the wives. Okay. So keep in mind, yes, the husband is the head of the wife, but yet this is how he is supposed to treat his wife. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. How did he love the church? He gave himself up for her that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water by the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle, or any such thing, that she may be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So here's one thing that I want to bring out too, that I think can help some people, especially women, understand this, because a lot of times we think, or maybe we're told by husbands or men, that we're less valuable because I'm the head of the home. I'm the head of the home. I'm the head of the home.
It is absurd.
It is. But this is one way that we can think of it, in terms that I think will make sense. I know this helps me in how my mind works. Okay. Let's not even look at the husband. We're not even going to talk about the husband. It's just you and your kids. Think of your relationship, wives, with your children. I am the head of my children. My children are in subjection to me.
They better be.
They are. Thomas makes sure that they are. Now, let me ask you this. Your children being in subjection to you and submitting to you, do you think that your children are more or less valuable than you? There's no question in any of your minds. If you are a normal, mentally healthy mom, then you look at your children as much, much more valuable than you are. and you would do anything for those children. You would absolutely jump in front of a car to push them out of the way, and you would die for your child.
Yeah.
I know you would. I would too. There is no doubt in my mind that my children have a higher value, in my opinion, than I do, than I have in my own eyes, okay? But yet they are to be in submission to me. So I don't know if that helps understand the value. I also don't want you to take that to the extreme and be like, what, now I have to listen to my husband like I'm a child and he's my parent? No, please
It's not what she's saying.
Please don't go to this extreme and be defensive and be upset. I'm trying to explain how you are to understand the value. Even though you might be second in command in your home, you still have a higher value. Not a higher value. You still have a great value, okay? And I know that my husband has said many times that he values me more than he values himself, and I think that's true. And I value my children more than I value myself, right? So we can kind of understand a little bit more how that relationship works when we think about our children.
And as we kind of look at this and talk about this, I think just looking around our room. So we record in our living room. And so I can see all of our living room. I can see our kitchen. And as I look around the room, I would say 90, maybe 99% of the way that this house is decorated, Lysandra has chosen it. Mm-hmm. Lysandra has chosen where the furniture is at right now.
Thomas moved the furniture, but I chose.
Yes, I definitely moved it. And hey, you're talking about mutual submission, right? That is a way for me to serve her, to put her first, to submit and be in submission to my wife and respect and honor her. I want her to walk into this house and feel safe and feel at home and feel at peace. And part of that is having her home the way that she likes it, the way that she feels comfortable. And so that is an example of how you as a husband, it's a very small example of how you as a husband can be in submission to your wife as Christ has commanded, how you can love her as Christ loved the church. It's not about you. Okay. And if you will, just like these verse says, if you love her like your own body, then that's going to work out well for you.
That's right. And here's the thing. You said, you were talking about the furniture, and you said, now this is a small thing, but here's the thing, guys, husbands, it is the small things that matter. It really is. Like, if your wife feels like she has to claw and fight tooth and nail to even have any kind of opinion or say in all of the little things that she's constantly dealing with in her life, then when the big decision hits, she is going to fight, claw, and nail trying to get her way, because she's already seen that you don't put her first in anything else. She's already seen that you're not loving her the way that you're supposed to. And now here comes a big decision, and she's terrified. She's scared because you're not already showing it in the little things. So really, the little things are maybe more important than these big decisions, because the little things happen constantly.
And here's another small example of being in submission with one another in your marriage relationship. Now, those of you who are watching by way of YouTube right now, you're going to very clearly be able to see and understand this a little bit. The wall behind us right now that we use as a backdrop for our recording. When Lysandra was looking at the house and showing me, hey, I think this is a house, which that's another example, but that was a huge one. Lysandra really wanted this house. And honestly, I could care less where we live. For some of you guys, you care more about that, what your house looks like and all that. My wife being happy here was the most important thing to me. So when she said, in fact, I think you've literally picked out every place we've ever lived together.
I have chosen the house every single time.
Now, we've always talked about it. We've always talked about it.
Yeah.
But Lysandra has picked out the places we lived, including this house. That's a major way that I showed her respect and reverence. And I'm patting myself a little bit on the back, just trying to give you some examples. Yeah. But when we were looking at the house online from Iowa, this house is obviously in Florida. She saw this space behind us and wanted to do some sort of pallet wall or something.
Yep.
And we together talked about different colors that we could do. And she had an idea of doing these colors, and we kind of picked out the colors together. But we got the colors picked out. One of the things Lysandra wanted to do was to whitewash it afterward.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was too like in your face, bright, crazy. I thought people were going to be like, "Oh, she's crazy."
And so
tone this down.
She's doing a majority of the work. I'm helping her put the wall up like it is now. And we get it up and stand back and look at it. And I was like, I really love it the way that it is right now.
I was like, "Are you sure it's not too crazy? It's so bright."
Yeah. And so she wanted the wall in the first place. And so I said, if that's what you want, then fantastic. And I know my wife does great work. I've seen her do a few other things, a few other projects. So I know she's going to do great work. It's going to look fantastic. But if that's what you want, great. So this is me submitting to her and what she wants. Now I come back with, I really love it the way that it is. I think the bright is vibrant. It reminds us of the ocean, which is all our other decorations. And she had in her heart to start with, I'm going to whitewash it and let the color come through a little bit. But she then submitted to me. Mm-hmm. And now we have this beautiful backdrop that we use every single week.
And I'm really glad that it ended up the way that it did. Like, I love it now. And I don't think it's too bright and crazy. And everybody who comes talks about how much they love the wall. And so the mutual submission thing worked out with the pallet wall.
And it's just about...
It's an example.
Preferring one another, serving each other, submitting to one another. And we've got to stop looking at submission as a one-way street, because it's not intended to be. This is not the army where you just have this commander who's going to tell you as the grunt person just whatever you're going to do. No, this is a marriage relationship. This is a team. So we're supposed to be looking out for each other.
That's right. And there are going to be times where in the team you disagree. And when it's little things like whether or not to whitewash a wall, although whitewashing a wall or not may be a huge deal to you.
It could be, yeah.
Depending on how you feel about things. That could be a major, major decision. But there are some decisions that across the board are huge, life-changing decisions, no matter who you are. And there will be times in those huge decisions you disagree. And when that happens and it comes down to like a decision must be made and we do not see eye to eye, that is where the wife will submit to the husband. Should, according to the Bible. That's where a wife should say, okay, you make the decision. I don't agree with the decision you're making, but I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to trust you. I'm going to ultimately trust God. I'm going to duck so God can hit my husband, and I'm going to follow you.
Yeah.
And this has happened in our marriage a couple of times, 3 or 4. Yeah. So we've been married 20 years, and it doesn't happen very often because the truth is we communicate a lot. Thomas loves me like Christ loved the church. He loves me very sacrificially. And so it's very rare that we end up at a place where we wholeheartedly disagree about something. We can usually come to an understanding with just communication and sharing each other's point of view. But there have been a couple of times, and there's one that is such a big deal that it still stands out in my mind today. It's about 7 years ago, and we were trying to decide if we should move from Iowa to Alabama. Thomas had a job offer in Alabama. Our kids were small, and everything in my soul said we shouldn't move. We shouldn't move. I prayed. We both prayed. We both fasted. We were both in the Word of God every day. We were checking all of the spiritual boxes, right? Like, okay, is there any sin in our lives that would like prevent our prayers or that would hinder us from hearing the voice of God? Are we listening to Holy Spirit? Are our hearts and our conscience seared? Like, we're trying to figure out how is it that we don't agree? Because Thomas said we should move, and I said we shouldn't move. So we disagreed on this very, very big decision. And we talked about it for quite some time. And the church was waiting for a response. We had to say yes or say no to this church who was calling him. And it came down to the decision time. And He said, I know we're supposed to move. And I said, I know we're supposed to stay. And through tears, I said, okay, I am going to submit to your decision and to your leadership. And I said, I will follow you to Alabama, even though I don't think that we're supposed to go. And I said, I will support your ministry and I will work in the ministry and I will do whatever it takes to help you succeed there. And I said, I'm not going to talk about it anymore either. Like, I'm following you. So that means no more, are you sure you want to do this? What about this? Da, da, da. No, I was done. I was not going to talk about it. I was just going to submit. Now, I was quiet verbally out loud, but I was very vocal in my prayer life. I continued to pray a lot. But I submitted to Thomas and I started crying. I remember we were just walking up the stairs and I started crying and I was like, these are the stairs where I fell down with Abigail. And I'm like, like every little part of our house became this big emotional, sentimental issue. And I was like, just devastated. I was saying goodbye to my house and all this stuff. Anyway, a couple of days went by. We're like, okay, this is the plan. I started to go through the house and what are we going to get rid of? What are we going to pack and take? And we're getting ready to move in our minds. And I was helping my sister rake leaves a couple of days later, and Thomas called me on the phone. And I put the rake down and I answered the phone, and he said, God's just shown me we're not supposed to move. We're supposed to stay in Iowa. And I started weeping. I'm out there in the leaves, like knee deep, weeping. I must have looked like an insane person.
More insane than usual.
And this would have been my grand opportunity to be like, I told you so, you loser. You need to listen to me. I told you so.
Is that what you're doing now? She's waited 7 years to say these words to me.
No, baby. But that's not how I handled it. I just said, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to God. Thank you so much. I just thanked Thomas. And then we hung up and later on we, really discussed it all and talked it through. But that is an example of a time in my life where I followed biblical submission, even though I completely disagreed with Thomas. I trusted Thomas based on the way that he had already treated me and loved me sacrificially. But ultimately, it wasn't a trust in Thomas. It was a trust in God.
Right.
It really was, because I kept going to God and praying that God would help us to do the right thing so we didn't mess up our children, our family, our finances, or whatever. And ultimately, submission is a trust in God. It is not a trust in your husband.
Now, my job as a husband is to make my home a safe place for my wife to submit. If she's always terrified that I'm going to mistreat her or put my own needs first, or ignore her, I'm making it nearly impossible for her to submit. I want my wife to find joy in our home and in our marriage. I want it to be easy for Lysandra to feel safe submitting to my leadership. That means I have to live sacrificially in our marriage. And as you just think about the issues that most marriages have in this area, it's because we as husbands, we're living selfishly. We're putting ourselves first instead of putting our spouses first. And you really need to stop, husbands, and you need to stop and you need to think about the way that you're loving your wife. Are you loving her like Christ loved the church? Mm-hmm. Are you serving her the way that you're supposed to, as Christ did, following his example of leadership and authority? Because the picture that's being painted in Ephesians chapter number 5 is Jesus' relationship with the church, with his followers. And you think about the way that he treated his followers. He sacrificed for them. He loved them unconditionally, even those people he knew would betray him. Mm-hmm. Think about Judas. Mm-hmm. He spent, 3.5 years loving this guy.
Who was stealing from
having him involved in knowing the whole time this guy's going to stab him in the back and betray him. Think about Peter. He knew Peter was going to deny even knowing him 3 times after Jesus had done so much for Peter. All the other guys, the Bible says they all forsook him and ran away. So he invested and loved people. And then, of course, right before he's going to suffer and die for those he loved, he gets up from the table takes off his garment of authority. And because that's one thing as husbands, we like to throw that authority card out there. Like we've been given the role of leadership in the home and we want to throw around our authority. Jesus took off that outer garment that represented his authority. And he picked up a different garment that represented service. He girded himself with a towel of a servant and began to wash his disciples' feet, which is the job for the lowest of the low in that culture. That's the way that he loved and served the church. That's the way we as husbands are to love and to serve our wives.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, when you look into biblical submission, you realize that it's not about power. It's not about different values. It's not about blindly following. It's organized leadership with the goal of creating safety for everyone in the home. It gives responsibility to the man for what happens in his home and in his leadership. And the truth is, when biblical submission is practiced properly, everyone's protected. Everyone's loved and cared for. And there is peace in the home. Really, submission is a beautiful thing.
So when we talk about a family meeting tonight, we want you to share how you feel about submission. And why do you feel that way? If you really have this cringe factor when the word submission is brought up, why is that? Like, is there certain things that have happened in your past? Maybe you need to talk about some abuse that you have suffered at the hands of a husband or a pastor or some other person that has misused their authority.
Maybe a father.
Share if you feel your spouse doesn't submit in a biblical way. Like that's either of you. Mm-hmm. Maybe as a husband, you feel like, man, my wife, she doesn't listen and follow my leadership. Now, first thing I would ask myself, if that's true, is, am I doing something to hinder that so she doesn't want to? Mm-hmm. Is there a reason she doesn't trust me? And maybe that's a conversation you need to have with her. Is, hey, I sense that you have a hard time following my leadership. Is there a reason for that? And really being open and honest about that. And wives, in a loving way, you may have to have a conversation and say, listen, I love you, but so often you put yourselves first. You put yourself first. And so maybe you feel disrespected. And just spend some time talking about what changes could be made to make both partners feel mutual submission is present in your relationship.
Thank you for joining us today. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information to be helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like, we'd love for you to shoot us a text, or maybe call and leave us a voice message and ask us a question or share your story with us at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite all of our friends to join us for our next family meeting. We're going to talk about personality tests for the family.
Yeah, I think that'll be very good.
Yeah, we had a family day where one of the things that we did was we all took a personality test and then talked about the results. And it's so fun and it's really great. Knowing who each family member is at their core can really help you understand them, and it can deepen your family relationships. And bottom line is, it's kind of fun.
So we'll kind of share some of the things that we talked about. We'll share the link so that you can take the quiz with your family members and have a conversation and learn each other just a little bit better. Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay. YouTube, you gotta wait 1 second. Thomas, thank you for loving me sacrificially. Like, even through this podcast episode, I'm literally just like, I'm so thankful my husband loves me like he does.
I do love you.
I really appreciate it because you truly make it easy for me to submit.
You are the best thing in my life.
I love you. Oh, I got caught on that.
Yeah, don't ruin the microphone showing your love for me.
But I do love you.
Yeah, this is one of those conversations that can be really challenging in some relationships. But it doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. And like we talked about at the beginning of this episode here in our time together on video, we want to hear about what is your experience with submission, either positively or negatively. Maybe you disagree with some of the things that we've talked about. I'd love to hear why. Like,
right.
like why do you view it the way that you view it? And so share some of those things with us, and we'd love to have a conversation with you right there on YouTube. But with that, we're going to get on to what we've got to do today. So you guys have a great week also. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.